The wind moved like a living thing across the dry plains, carrying dust, old whispers, and the faint scent of distant rain that never quite arrived. It brushed against the wooden walls of a lone cabin standing at the edge of Apache land, a place where silence held more truth than words ever could. Inside the cabin lived a man known among his people as Thunderhawk, a warrior whose name carried weight, respect, and a shadow of something deeper that no one dared question. Thunderhawk was not a man who believed in soft things, not in promises, not in love, and certainly not in the strange new custom brought by traders and settlers, the idea of a mail-order bride. Yet here he was, standing near the doorway as the sun sank low, waiting for a woman he had never seen, a woman he had chosen from a piece of paper that described her as pure, quiet, and obedient. He did not choose her out of desire. He chose her because the elders had begun to speak. A warrior must not live alone forever. A home without a woman was a fire without warmth. His land was wide, his horses strong, his enemies distant, but his nights had grown long and restless. Something in him, something he never named, had begun to ache. So he agreed. The trader had smiled too easily when the deal was made. He spoke of beauty and innocence as if they were things that could be packed into a wagon and delivered like grain. Thunderhawk had listened in silence, his sharp eyes never leaving the man's face. Deep down, he knew the world beyond his land did not deal in truth so easily. Still, he waited. As the sky turned from gold to a deep burning red, the sound of wheels finally broke the stillness. A wagon approached slowly, its wooden frame creaking under the weight of distance and secrets. Thunderhawk stepped forward, his tall figure casting a long shadow across the dirt. The wagon stopped a few steps away. The driver, an old man with tired eyes, avoided looking at him for too long. That alone was enough to stir unease. Without a word, the driver climbed down and moved to the back, his movements stiff, almost hesitant. "She is inside," the man muttered, his voice dry as the land around them. Thunderhawk said nothing. He walked forward, each step steady, controlled. His heart did not race. He had faced battles, blood, and death without fear. A woman in a wagon should have meant nothing. But something felt wrong. When the cover was pulled back, the fading light slipped inside, revealing a figure sitting still, almost still. She did not rush out. She did not speak. She simply sat there, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her head slightly lowered. "Step down," Thunderhawk said, his voice calm but firm. The woman moved slowly, as if each motion required strength she barely had. When her feet touched the ground, she swayed for a moment before steadying herself. Only then did she lift her face. Her eyes were not what he expected. They were not empty, not soft, not obedient. They carried something heavy. Fear, yes, but also defiance, and beneath it all, a quiet sorrow that seemed far too deep for someone so young. Her name, according to the paper, was Lark Song. For a brief moment, Thunderhawk studied her without speaking. Her beauty was not loud or striking, but it was there in the way her dark hair framed her face, in the pale strength of her features, in the silence she held like a shield. "You are far from your home," he said. "So are you," she replied softly. The answer caught him off guard, though he did not show it. The driver quickly handed over a small bundle and muttered something about the journey being long. Then, almost too quickly, he climbed back onto the wagon and left without waiting for thanks or payment beyond what had already been given. That was when Thunderhawk knew something had been hidden. He turned back toward the woman, his sharp gaze narrowing slightly. The wind picked up again, lifting the edge of her dress, and for the first time, he noticed what should have been obvious from the start. The curve beneath the fabric, subtle, but unmistakable. His body went still. "You carry a child," he said, not as a question, but as a fact. The woman closed her eyes for a brief second, as if the truth had finally caught up with her. When she opened them again, there was no denial left. Yes, the single word fell between them like a stone. Silence followed, thick and heavy, the kind of silence that changes everything. Thunderhawk's jaw tightened. The paper had promised purity. The trader had sworn it. And yet here stood the woman he had brought into his home, carrying another man's child. For a moment, something dark flickered in his eyes, not anger alone, but betrayal, pride wounded in a way that cut deeper than any blade. "You were not honest," he said. "I was not given the chance to be," she replied, her voice trembling now, though she fought to keep it steady. "If I had told them, I would not have survived the journey. I would not have been chosen. I had nowhere else to go." Her words did not beg for sympathy. They simply told the truth. The wind howled louder, as if the land itself was listening. Thunderhawk turned away from her, staring out into the endless stretch of fading light. His mind moved through 100 thoughts at once: honor, pride, the expectations of his people, the quiet loneliness that had led him to this moment. He had ordered a pure bride. Instead, fate had brought him something far more complicated. Behind him, Lark Song stood frozen, waiting. She knew what men like him did when faced with dishonor. She had seen enough of the world to understand that her life could change in a single breath, or end. The sun finally slipped below the horizon, leaving only shadows and the rising chill of night. Thunderhawk took a slow breath, his hands curling into fists at his sides. Then, without turning back, he spoke. "You will come inside." The words were simple, but they carried something she could not yet understand. Hope, not fear, or something far more dangerous. Lark Song hesitated for only a moment before stepping forward, crossing the distance between the unknown and whatever waited for her inside the cabin. And as the door closed behind them, the night seemed to hold its breath, as if even the stars were waiting to see what Thunderhawk would do next. The cabin felt smaller once the door closed, as if the walls had leaned in to listen. A low fire burned in the stone pit, its light flickering across rough wooden beams and casting long shadows that moved like silent watchers. Lark Song stood near the doorway, unsure whether to step further or remain where she was, as though crossing deeper into the room meant stepping into a life she could no longer escape. Thunderhawk did not look at her right away. He moved past her with steady steps and placed another piece of wood into the fire. The flames rose slightly, warming the cold air, but doing little to ease the tension that hung between them. "You will sit," he said after a moment, his voice controlled, almost to controlled. She obeyed, lowering herself onto a wooden chair near the wall. Her hands rested over her stomach without thinking, a quiet, protective gesture she had learned to hide but could not fully forget. Thunderhawk noticed. He noticed everything. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Outside, the wind brushed against the cabin again, carrying the distant cry of a night bird. Inside, only the crackle of fire filled the silence. "You said you had no choice," he finally said, turning toward her. "Tell me why." Lark Song lifted her gaze slowly. The firelight reflected in her eyes, revealing something deeper than fear now. There was exhaustion there, and something else, something that had been broken, but not fully lost. "My father owed a debt," she began quietly. "Not to a good man, to a man who trades people the way others trade horses." Thunderhawk's expression hardened slightly. "I was part of that debt." The words settled heavily in the room. "He told them I was pure," she continued, her voice steady despite the weight of what she was saying. "He told them I would be a good wife. He told them whatever they needed to hear to make the trade happen. And the child?" Thunderhawk asked. Her fingers tightened slightly over her dress. "I did not choose that either." There was no need for more explanation. The truth was clear enough, carried in the way her voice trembled just once before she forced it still again. Thunderhawk felt something shift inside him, something he did not welcome. He had expected lies, excuses, maybe even manipulation. What he had not expected was this kind of quiet honesty. Still, it changed nothing. "You brought another man's blood into my home," he said. "I brought only myself," she replied softly. "The rest came with me whether I wished it or not." Her words were not defiant, but they were not weak either. They held a strange kind of strength, the kind born from having nothing left to lose. Thunderhawk studied her again, more carefully this time. She was not what he had ordered, not what he had been promised, but she was not what he had feared either. "You are not from this land," he said. "No. You do not know our ways." "No. And yet you speak as if you are not afraid." A faint, almost invisible smile touched her lips, though it carried no joy. "I am afraid," she said. "But fear does not change what is true." The fire cracked sharply, breaking the moment. Thunderhawk turned away again, pacing slowly across the room. His thoughts were restless, moving between duty and instinct, between what he had been taught and what stood before him now. His people would not accept this easily. A warrior taking in a woman already carrying a child not his own, would bring whispers, questions, doubt, and yet, sending her away into the night was no simple act either. This land was not kind to those who walked it alone. "Why did you not run?" he asked suddenly. "You could have left before reaching here." Lark Song shook her head. "There is nowhere to run when the world has already closed its doors," she said. "At least here. I was told there might be a chance to live." The way she said it made something tighten in his chest. A chance to live, not to be loved. Not to be safe, just to live. Thunderhawk stopped walking. He had spent years building strength, earning respect, becoming a man others looked to. Yet in this moment, standing in front of this woman, he felt something unfamiliar, uncertain. "You will stay here tonight," he said finally. "Tomorrow, I will decide what is to be done." Lark Song nodded, though the words clearly did little to ease her mind. "Thank you," she said quietly. He did not respond. Instead, he moved toward a small wooden chest and pulled out a folded blanket, placing it on the far side of the room. "You will sleep there," he said. She stood and walked toward it slowly. Every step felt heavy, as if the weight of her past followed close behind. When she reached the blanket, she paused, glancing back at him. "Why did you choose a mail-order bride?" she asked softly. The question lingered in the air. Thunderhawk did not answer right away. When he finally did, his voice was lower, quieter than before. "Because I was told it would bring peace to my home." Her gaze softened slightly. "And has it?" she asked. He looked at her then, really looked at her, as if seeing her not just as a problem to solve, but as a person standing in the middle of his life without warning. "No," he said. The honesty between them felt strange, almost fragile. Lark Song lowered herself onto the blanket, pulling it around her shoulders. The warmth of the fire reached her, but it did not fully chase away the cold inside her. Thunderhawk remained standing for a long time, watching the flames, listening to the quiet breathing of the woman who had entered his life like a storm he had not prepared for. Hours passed slowly. At some point, Lark Song shifted in her sleep, a faint sound escaping her as if she were caught in a memory she could not escape. Thunderhawk's eyes moved toward her instinctively. He took a step closer without realizing it. For a brief moment, the hardness in his expression faded. He saw not a burden, not a mistake, but someone who had been pushed into a life she never chose. And yet, the truth remained. By morning, he would have to decide. Outside, the wind grew stronger, pressing against the cabin as if trying to force its way inside. Inside, the fire burned low, and somewhere between silence and shadow, a question lingered that neither of them could answer yet. What happens when a man who trusts no one is forced to protect the one person he was never meant to accept? Morning did not arrive gently. It came with a pale, cold light that slipped through the cracks of the cabin walls and settled over everything like a quiet warning. The fire had burned down to soft embers, and the air carried the early chill that made the land feel both endless and unforgiving. Lark Song was already awake. She sat near the edge of the blanket, her back straight, her hands resting in her lap as if she had been waiting for something she could not name. Her eyes moved slowly across the cabin, taking in every detail: the rough table, the hanging tools, the silence that felt heavier in daylight. Thunderhawk stood near the doorway, watching the horizon through a narrow opening. He had not slept much. The night had passed in fragments, thoughts coming and going like restless spirits. "You wake early," he said without turning. "I did not truly sleep," she replied. He nodded once, as if that answer made sense. Outside, the land stretched wide and empty, but he knew better than to trust its quiet, or traveled fast. Even in places where voices were few, by now, someone would have seen the wagon, someone would have guessed, and someone would come. "You should eat," he said. Lark Song hesitated before standing. She moved carefully, her steps measured, as if she were still unsure of her place in this space. Thunderhawk handed her a small piece of bread and dried meat. She accepted it with a quiet thank you, though her appetite seemed distant. As she ate, her gaze drifted toward him again. "You said you would decide today," she said. "Yes. And have you?" Thunderhawk finally turned to face her fully. His expression was unreadable, but there was tension in the way he held himself, as if the answer was not as simple as he wanted it to be. "No," he said. "Not yet." Before she could respond, a sound cut through the stillness. Hoofbeats. Not one horse, several. Thunderhawk's body reacted instantly. He stepped outside without another word, his eyes scanning the distance. 3 riders approached, their figures growing clearer against the rising light. Lark Song moved to the doorway, stopping just behind him. "Who are they?" she asked softly. "Men who ask questions," he replied. The riders came to a stop a few steps away. The one at the front was a broad man with sharp features and a gaze that carried authority. His name was Iron Viper, a warrior known not only for his strength, but for his strict belief in tradition. His eyes moved past Thunderhawk, landing briefly on Lark Song before returning. "So it is true," Iron Viper said. "You have taken a bride from the traders." Thunderhawk remained still. I'd have taken a woman into my home, he said. Iron Viper's gaze sharpened. There's a difference. The other two men remained silent, watching closely. Iron Viper dismounted slowly, his boots pressing into the dirt with purpose. The elders have heard, he continued. They sent me to see with my own eyes. His attention shifted again to Lark's song, lingering longer this time, noticing what could not be hidden, and to understand why a warrior like you would bring this into our land. The air grew tight. Lark's song felt it, the weight of judgment pressing against her before a single word was spoken directly to her. Her hand instinctively moved again to her stomach, though she quickly lowered it. This is my matter, Thunderhawk said, his voice steady but firm. It stopped being only yours the moment it touched the honor of our people, Iron Viper replied. For a brief moment, silence stood between them like a drawn blade. You were promised a pure bride, Iron Viper continued, yet you stand here with something else. Did the traitors deceive you, or did you choose to ignore the truth? Thunderhawk's jaw tightened. I was deceived. Then send her away. The words came quickly, without hesitation. Lark's song felt them like a sudden drop beneath her feet. Thunderhawk did not answer right away. Iron Viper took a step closer. This is not a small matter, he said. If you allow this, others will speak. They will question your strength, your judgment. They will question whether you still stand as one of us. The wind picked up again, swirling dust between them. Thunderhawk finally spoke. I do not make decisions based on fear of whispers. Iron Viper's eyes narrowed slightly. No, he said, but you should make them based on wisdom. Behind Thunderhawk, Lark's song stood still, her breathing slow, controlled. She knew this moment did not belong to her. It had decided everything about her future. One wrong word, one wrong choice, and she would be sent back into a world that had already tried to break her. Say something, Iron Viper pressed. Will you keep her, knowing what she carries, or will you do what must be done? The question hung heavy. Thunderhawk could feel every gaze on him, not just the man in front of him, but the unseen eyes of his people, the weight of tradition, the expectations that had shaped him since he was a boy, and behind him, the quiet presence of the woman who had changed everything without trying. His voice, when it came, was low. She stays. For now, the words were careful, chosen, not a full claim, not a rejection, but enough. Iron Viper studied him for a long moment, as if trying to see beyond the answer. For now, he repeated, that is not an answer that will satisfy the elders. It is the only one they will have today, Thunderhawk said. The tension stretched further. Then, slowly, Iron Viper stepped back. This is not finished, he said. You have until the next council gathering. After that, your choice will not be yours alone. With that, he turned and mounted his horse. The other two followed without a word. Within moments, they were gone, leaving only the echo of hoofbeats behind. Silence returned, but it was no longer the same. Lark's song let out a breath she had been holding. You could have sent me away, she said quietly. Thunderhawk did not turn. Yes, but you did not. He finally looked at her, his gaze steady but distant. Do not mistake delay for kindness, he said. This is not over. She nodded, though something in her eyes shifted, a small flicker of something warmer, something dangerous in its own way. Still, she said, you gave me time. It was a fragile gift. Thunderhawk turned back toward the open land, his thoughts already moving ahead, toward the council, toward the choices that would soon demand more than silence. Behind him, Lark's song stood in the doorway of a life that had not yet decided if it would accept her. And somewhere between duty and something neither of them fully understood, a bond began to form. Quiet, uncertain, and strong enough to change everything if it was allowed to grow. The days that followed did not bring peace. They brought a slow, tightening pressure that settled over the cabin like a storm that refused to break. Every sunrise felt heavier than the last, and every sunset carried the quiet reminder that the council gathering was drawing closer. Thunderhawk became a man divided. By day, he moved as he always had, strong, controlled, focused. He rode across the land, checked his horses, spoke little, and listened more. But something had changed in the way he looked at things. His gaze lingered longer. His thoughts did not settle as easily. By night, the silence inside the cabin felt different. Lark's song no longer stayed near the doorway. She moved more freely now, though always with a quiet awareness of the space she occupied. She cleaned, cooked what little she could, and slowly brought a kind of life into the cabin that had not been there before. One evening, as the sky turned deep blue and the first stars appeared, Thunderhawk returned to find a small fire already burning and water heating beside it. Lark Song sat nearby, her sleeves rolled slightly, her hair loosely tied back. She looked up as he entered, her eyes meeting his in a way that no longer held only fear. "You were gone longer today," she said. "There was much to see," he replied. She nodded, as if she understood more than he had said. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she stood and handed him a wooden cup. "You should drink," she said. "The nights are getting colder." He took it without a word, but his fingers brushed hers for the briefest second. It was nothing, and yet it was not. A quiet shift passed between them, something unspoken but felt. Thunderhawk moved to sit across from her, the firelight dancing between them. He watched her as she settled back down, noticing the small details he had ignored before. The way she moved carefully, the way her hands sometimes rested over her stomach without thinking, the way her eyes softened when she thought he was not looking. "You work as if this is your home," he said. She looked at him, surprised by the comment. "I do not know where else to belong," she answered. The honesty in her voice struck deeper than he expected. "This place was not meant for you," he said. "Neither was the life I left behind," she replied. The fire cracked, sending a small burst of sparks upward. Thunderhawk leaned forward slightly, his gaze steady. "Do you regret coming here?" Lark Song held his eyes for a long moment. "No," she said quietly. "I regret the path that led me here, but not this place." Her words lingered in the space between them, soft but powerful. Thunderhawk felt something shift again, stronger this time. It unsettled him in a way no battle ever had. Before he could respond, a sudden sound broke the moment. A distant shout, then another. Thunderhawk was on his feet instantly, his body alert. He stepped outside, scanning the darkness beyond the cabin. Lark Song followed, stopping just behind him. "What is it?" she asked. "Trouble," he said. Figures moved in the distance, approaching fast. Not the calm, steady approach of visitors, but something urgent, chaotic. Within moments, a young warrior stumbled into view, breathing hard, his clothes marked with dust and strain. His name was Redstone, known for his speed and sharp eyes. "They are coming," Redstone said, his voice urgent. "Men from the trading routes. Not traders this time. Hunters." Thunderhawk's expression darkened. "How many?" "Enough," Redstone replied. "And they are asking for a woman who was taken before she could be delivered." Lark Song felt the ground shift beneath her. "They found me," she whispered. Thunderhawk turned slightly, his gaze flicking toward her before returning to Redstone. "How far?" "Not far. They will reach here before the next hour." The tension sharpened instantly. Redstone looked between them, understanding dawning quickly. "This is because of her," he said. Thunderhawk did not deny it. "Go," he told Redstone. "Warn the others. Tell them to stay back unless I call." Redstone hesitated. "This could bring more trouble with the elders," he said. "It already has," Thunderhawk replied. After a brief pause, Redstone nodded and ran back into the darkness. Silence returned, but it was no longer quiet. It was alive, waiting. Lark Song stepped forward, her face pale, but steady. "You should send me away," she said. "If they are looking for me, I will go." Thunderhawk turned to her fully. "And go where?" he asked. "Away from here," she said, "before they bring danger to your land, your people. You think they will stop if you leave," he said. "Men like that do not turn back easily." Her hands trembled slightly, but she held her ground. "I will not be the reason you lose everything," she said. Thunderhawk stepped closer, his presence strong, unyielding. "You are already the reason everything is changing," he said. The words were not harsh. They were real. Lark Song's breath caught, her eyes searching his face. "Then let me fix it," she whispered. "You cannot fix what was never yours to break," he replied. The wind rose again, stronger now, as if the land itself felt what was coming. In the distance, faint shapes began to form, riders. Many of them. The air grew tight, heavy with the promise of confrontation. Thunderhawk moved quickly, grabbing his rifle and checking its weight in his hands. His movements were precise, practiced, but there was something more behind them now. Not just duty, something personal. He looked at Lark Song again, really looked at her, as if trying to hold on to something before the moment passed. "Stay inside," he said. "No," she replied immediately. His jaw tightened. "This is not your fight. It became mine the moment I stepped into your life," she said. Their eyes locked, tension rising not just from the danger approaching, but from everything left unsaid between them. For a brief second, The world seemed to narrow to just the two of them. Then the sound of hoofbeats grew louder, closer. Thunderhawk turned back toward the open land, his grip firm on his weapon. Behind him, Lark Song stood her ground, fear and strength woven together in a way that made her impossible to ignore. The riders were almost upon them now, shadows turning into men. Voice is beginning to carry through the night, and somewhere between the coming storm and the fragile bond that had formed inside that small cabin, one truth stood clear. The next moments would decide everything, not just who stayed, but who they were willing to become when faced with a choice that could not be undone. The riders came to a hard stop just beyond the edge of the clearing, their horses restless under the weight of men who had traveled far with one purpose in mind. Dust lifted around them, hanging in the air like a warning that refused to settle. The man at the front stepped forward slowly, his eyes sharp, his presence carrying the kind of confidence that came from believing he owned whatever he chased. His name was Blackthorn. His gaze moved past Thunderhawk and landed on Lark Song, standing in the doorway, refusing to hide. "There she is," Blackthorn said, his voice cold but satisfied. "The one who was promised." Thunderhawk stepped forward, placing himself between them without hesitation. "She is not yours," he said. Blackthorn let out a low, humorless laugh. "She was paid for," he replied. "That makes her mine." Lark Song felt the words like chains trying to wrap around her again. But this time she did not lower her eyes. She stepped forward, coming to stand beside Thunderhawk, her presence quiet but unshaken. "I was never yours," she said. Blackthorn's expression darkened slightly, though it did not shake his confidence. "You speak boldly for someone who ran," he said. "I did not run," she replied. "I was sent." The men behind him shifted, some amused, others impatient. Blackthorn took another step closer. "This does not need to be difficult," he said, his gaze now locked on Thunderhawk. "Hand her over, and we leave. No trouble for you, no trouble for your people." The offer hung in the air, simple, dangerous. Thunderhawk did not move. "You came onto my land," he said. "You speak of taking what stands in my home. That is already trouble." The tension snapped tight. For a moment, it seemed like everything would break into violence, but Thunderhawk raised his hand slightly, not in surrender, but in control. "This does not need to end in blood," he said. "Turn back." Blackthorn studied him carefully, measuring something unseen. "You protect her like she belongs to you," he said. Thunderhawk's voice did not waver. "She does." The words landed with weight, heavier than anything spoken before. Lark Song felt them deeply, something inside her shifting in a way she had not expected. Not just safety, not just protection, something more. Blackthorn's eyes narrowed. "You would claim another man's burden as your own?" he asked. Thunderhawk's gaze hardened. "I claim what I choose." Silence followed, thick and charged. Then, unexpectedly, another voice broke through. "Enough." All eyes turned. Iron Viper stepped forward from the shadows beyond the clearing, followed by several warriors. Redstone stood among them, his expression sharp, watchful. The balance had changed. Blackthorn's confidence flickered, just slightly. "This is not your concern," he said. Iron Viper's gaze was steady. "It became my concern when you brought your men onto our land without respect," he replied. The two men stood facing each other, power meeting power. "You trade in people," Iron Viper continued. "That is not our way." Blackthorn's jaw tightened. "She was part of a deal," he insisted. "And now she stands here," Iron Viper said. "And she has chosen to stay." Lark Song felt every word as if it were being placed carefully between her past and her future. Blackthorn looked between them all, calculating. "You would risk conflict for one woman?" he asked. Iron Viper did not answer immediately. Instead, his gaze shifted briefly to Thunderhawk, something unspoken passing between them. Then he looked back. "We protect what stands with us," he said. The meaning was clear. The land had chosen its side. Blackthorn let out a slow breath, his frustration visible now. "This is not over," he said. "No," Thunderhawk replied, "but it ends here tonight." For a long moment, it seemed like Blackthorn might push further, might test the strength standing against him. But something in the gathered warriors, in the calm certainty of their stance, made him reconsider. With a sharp motion, he turned his horse. "This will cost you," he said before riding away. The others followed, their presence fading into the night as quickly as it had come. Silence returned once more, but this time it felt different, louder. Breath returned to the space. Lark Song let out a slow exhale, her body finally releasing the tension it had held. Iron Viper stepped closer, his gaze moving between her and Thunderhawk. "You have made your path clear," he said. Thunderhawk met his eyes. Yes, there was no hesitation now. Iron Viper studied him for a moment longer, then gave a single nod. "The council will hear of this," he said, "but they will also hear how you stood." He turned and began to walk away, the others following him back into the darkness. Redstone paused briefly, giving Thunderhawk a small, approving look before leaving as well. Soon, it was quiet again, just the two of them. The wind had softened, the night calmer now, as if the land itself had accepted what had happened. Lark Song turned toward Thunderhawk, her eyes searching his face. "You could have let them take me," she said. He shook his head. "No." Why, the question was simple, but it carried everything. Thunderhawk stepped closer, his presence steady, certain in a way it had not been before. "Because you are not a debt," he said. "You are not a mistake, and you are not something to be traded." Her breath caught slightly. "Then what am I?" she asked softly. He looked at her, not as a burden, not as a problem, but as someone who had walked into his life and changed it without force. "You are the one who stayed," he said. Tears filled her eyes, though she did not let them fall. "And the child," she whispered. Thunderhawk's gaze softened, just enough to be seen. "The child is part of you," he said. "That is enough for me." The words settled deep, healing something that had been broken long before she arrived. For the first time, Lark Song allowed herself to step closer, closing the space between them. The fear that had once defined her movements was no longer in control. "You have given me more than a place to stay," she said. Thunderhawk reached out, his hand brushing against hers, this time not by accident. "You brought life into a place that had none," he replied. The fire inside the cabin still glowed faintly, waiting. Together, they stepped back inside, not as strangers bound by circumstance, but as the people who had chosen to stand together despite everything that had tried to keep them apart. Days turned into weeks, and the whispers that once threatened to rise began to fade. The council listened, questioned, and in time, accepted what had already become clear. Strength was not only found in battle. Sometimes it was found in choosing to protect, to trust, and to build something new from what others would have cast aside. As the seasons began to shift, the small cabin no longer felt like a place of tension. It felt like a home, and in that quiet space, surrounded by open land and endless sky, Thunderhawk and Lark Song found something neither of them had been promised. Not perfection, not ease, but something real. A love that had been tested before it even began, and a future that, for the first time, felt like it truly belonged to them both. Tell us in the comments how you liked the story and where you are watching from. If the story touched your heart, subscribe to our channel to stay with us for more exciting stories.